welcome back to our MERN stack tutorial series. So this is going to be the opening video. We're building a MERN stack application. And just a reminder, this is what the site is going to look like. It's basically a Zelda themed blog where I can click and I can filter on any of these, or I can come down here and I can display all of them. If I click on any of these, it should give me just an article about that game, and then I can navigate down there. I have an about page as well as an admin panel for our content management system. And we're building this using our MERN stack, which, if you remember, MERN stack is an acronym, and that stands for MongoDB, Express.js, React, and then finally Node.js. So if you don't have some of the software that we're going to need in this video installed, before you go on in this video, now is the time. So go down to the video description. You're going to need to install just a couple things. The first one is going to be MongoDB Compass, and this is basically your GUI that we're going to use within our local Windows machine or local whatever machine you're running locally. This is the GUI for running MongoDB. It's going to look something like this when you have that. The second one is going to be called Node.js, and this is the software that we're running on our backend server. And basically, it's a way to create a backend server using JavaScript. And then finally, the third piece of software that you're going to need is something called Insomnia. And now Insomnia is just simply a tool for making and testing HTTP requests. So this is going to be useful when we're developing our API. So if you don't have all three of these, I put all of the download descriptions down in the link below. We don't need to, you don't need to watch me install them. I already have all of them installed. You just go and install them yourself. One thing I will mention here on this Node.js, if you look here, it says I want the version 20.12.2 LTS. Now, if I click that drop-down arrow, you can see there's actually newer versions than that out there. But still, unless you're doing something like very cutting edge and experimental, we're going to stick with the LTS because LTS stands for long-term support version. So we're going to go with that version instead of the absolute newest version because sometimes those newest versions change from time to time, whereas the long-term support version is going to be supported indefinitely into the future. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start creating our site. The first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and make a folder for our web application here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put it in here. You can see I have C temp, and then I have a Zelda MERN site. Inside there, I have a project files folder, and this you can find also in the link below. It's in our project down on GitHub. And basically, this is going to have our JSON file that we're going to use to populate our MongoDB. And then it's going to have a bunch of images that we're going to serve up statically from our server. So to do that, before we even do any of that, come back up here. If you don't have this folder, obviously you need to make it, or you need to download this starter code from the GitHub repository. And basically the only thing you need is this project files directory. So that's up on the GitHub in the link down below. What I'm going to do is right click on the Zelda MERN folder, and we are going to do show more options, and it says open with code. If you don't have that option, that means you probably didn't install that when you installed VS Code. Not to worry. Basically, you need to open this directory in VS Code. And once you have that opened, now we're going to create a new directory in here and call it Backend. And I'll go ahead and actually create another one right now. At the top level, we'll create another directory, and we'll call that our front end. But for this video, we're building out the backend, so everything's going to be done inside of backend. So once we get in there, basically we need to install Node in this directory. So let's go ahead and open up a terminal. And down here, you can see our terminal has opened, and we're in C temp Zelda MERN. Well, that's not where we want to be because that's our top level, and we only want to install this Node.js in our backend directory. So cd for change directory into backend. And now, if you type dir, it shouldn't show anything because our directory is, of course, empty. But you can see we are, in fact, in backend. So to install it, all that we need to do is we can type npm init and then -y if you want to skip all the prompts. And this will go ahead and install Node inside of our directory. You can tell it worked because it's given us this package.json. And here is basically what this package.json is going to look like. And this is just a bare bones version right now. We need to install all of the dependencies that we need. So for this project, we are going to need Express because obviously that's part of the MERN stack. So we can go ahead and do that. So npm install Express. And if I hit enter right now, of course, it's going to install this one item, but I can actually install all of these dependencies on one line. So npm install Express, and then cores is another thing that we're going to use, and that's basically for HTTP security. Whenever you're running things like, for example, your backend server and your front end server, if you're running those two on a different domain, then you need cores to help with the authentication and the security between the two. Otherwise, you're going to get a bunch of HTTP errors with that. And then Mongoose is a library that we're going to be using for connecting to MongoDB. And then .env is going to allow us to have environment variables in our project. And then finally, there's a library called Multer that we're going to be using to serve up static images from our server instead of storing the images inside of the database directly. So now if I hit enter on that, it should install all of those. And now with that done, you can see in our dependencies within our package.json, we've got our cores, our .env, Express, Mongoose, and then Multer. And those are all there. These are the versions that I'm using in this video as of May 2024. So if you're watching this later and you want to use the same versions because you're running into issues, you can get all of those versions right there. So with that being said, let's go ahead into our backend, and I'm going to make a new file, and we'll call that server.js. And basically, this is going to be our JavaScript file for serving up our static images and then for handling all of our connections to our Mongo database. So to do that, let's start, because we haven't set up the Mongo database yet, let's go ahead and start with creating a server that can serve up those static images. So to do that, let's go ahead and in here, we need to add a few dependencies to this file at the top. So const express equals require. And then in here, we're going to require express. Same thing with Multer. So const Multer equals require Multer. And that, again, is going to be our library for serving up our images. And then let's do our path as well. So const path is going to be equal to require path, as well as our .env. So down here, I could just say require, and this is going to be .env. Whoops, not .env, dot.env. And then this is going to be .config. And once we have that, actually, let's save that file and go ahead and make our .env file. So click on your backend in here, and then we can click new file. And if I just name it .env, and then in here, whatever environment variables I put in here should be accessible within our application here. So for right now, we are going to need our image location. So our image location is going to be equal to, and this is going to be on your Windows machine. Here I put it in C//temp, and basically I'm going to come into that temp folder, and I'm going to make a new image folder here that we're actually serving them up from. So here I could say server images. And then what I need to do is from the project files, I'm going to copy all of these images that we have here, and I'm going to paste those into my new server images file. And basically, if we've got C temp server images there, so we need to have C temp server images here, and that way our path is going to copy. It's going to be the exact same. So this is the path to our images directory. And now that we have that, go ahead and save that. Come back to the server.js, and in here we can say const app is equal to express because we're using express here, and then we can say const port is going to be equal to process.env.port, and this is going to be, I'm going to say port 1987, which if you're wondering why, that seems like kind of a random port. Basically 1987 was the release date of the first Zelda video game. And I know actually probably some nerd out there is going to call me out on that and say, no, it was 1986, but I'm an American, and in 1987 was when the first game was released in North America. So anyway, that's where that 1987 port came from. Not relevant. You can really put that on whatever port you want, but I'm just going to use 1987 for the video here. And now we basically need to set up our Multer connection so that we can serve up those images. So I can say const storage is going to be equal to multer.disk storage. And then inside of here, basically, we need to set our destination. So our destination is going to be a function that, let's see, I can say rec file and then cb, and then inside of here I could say cb null process dot env dot image location. So basically this process.env image location is coming from our env file. That's this variable right here. So what I'm doing with that code is saying, hey, this ctemp server images is where our destination for all of these requests needs to go, because these are the images that we're looking for. Okay, now with the destination being set up, we need to go ahead and set our file name down here. I'm going to say file name, and we could say function request file cb, and then inside of here I could say cb null file file dot original name. And basically what that means is when the user is looking for these files, I'm going to serve them up as the original file name. Okay, with that being said, after that we could say const upload equals multer, and then in here I can say storage. Basically that is gonna set up our Multer variable there that we can use later. And then to actually handle this file upload, we need to set up a route for that. So to do that, I can say app.post, and in here I can say upload. And then after that, we're gonna say upload.single file, and then again, we want to have our request and our response, and then after we get the request and response, we are going to send back this, which is going to be response.status 200.json. So we're using JSON throughout this, and if you don't know what JSON is, you'll see it later in this video. We're going to talk a little bit about what that is and why we use it for web development and how we're using it here. But anyway, in here, I can say message. And basically, if you know your HTTP codes, 200 is a success code. So if we're passing a 200 in our response, we want to tell the user that the file was uploaded successfully. And then that should actually be it for this upload. And then after that, we can say app.use. And basically in here, I can say, we've got app.use. In here, we could say /image. So this directory is going to be whatever directory or whatever URL you want the user to put when they're making this HTTP request, because you don't generally want the user to know that all of these images are sitting in C temp server images, because the user doesn't care about your file structure. And we don't want them to care about that. We don't want them to know about that. So this /image is going to actually be the URL that we're using to access these images. And then after we have that /image, we can say express.static, and then in here, process.env.image location, because we're mapping these we're mapping these static images and this image location to this URL HTTP request. Okay, now with that set up, really all the last thing that we need to do is actually make our app listen on that port that we set up. So I could say app.listen, and then I'm going to hand it a port, which is of course that 1987 port that we defined above. And this is going to be an arrow function. And inside of this arrow function, all I'm going to do is just say console.log, and basically I'm going to tell myself what port I'm listening on. So server is running on port $port. And that should be everything that I need here. So now if I come down into my console and just type node server.js, make sure to save that file first, or this is not going to work, and then hit enter. And now you see we cannot find, of course, make sure you're actually in the backend folder here. So here you see I'm in C temp Zelda MERN. I need to cd into my backend, and then inside the backend run node server.js. And now you can see server is running on port 1987. So that's exactly what we want to see. But we also want to see that this is actually working. So to test this, let's go ahead and open up Insomnia. And when you open it up for the first time, it should look something like this. Basically, we can come in here and we can say we're going to add a new workspace here. So I'm just going to call this Zelda MERN tutorial. And just a local vault is fine. I don't need to sync this with the cloud or anything. Hit create on that. And once you have that created, you can go ahead and open that. Yeah, so we need to go to, once we have that, we need to go to new collection. And then in this new collection, we can call it the same. I can call it, I don't know, Zelda MERN create. And now that should take us to a screen that looks like this, where I can actually make a new HTTP request. And basically whatever I type up here is going to be what I'm requesting. So if I say HTTP //localhost at 1987 / so this is going to be our server where we have a local host running on 1987, and then / this needs to match right here where it says app.use /image. So this needs to be image. And then after that, I need to hand it the actual name of the image file that I want. So if I come into my server images, and let's just look in here. If I want to get any of these, I can say, I don't care, Zelda18.jpg. So if I come here and now type Zelda-18.jpg and then hit send, we cannot get image Zelda18.jpg. Okay, something's wrong. So basically why we're getting this is I made a silly mistake. If you look at our images again, you can see I have Zelda18.jpg, and then right here Zelda18.jpg, and what I'm trying to get is Zelda-18.jpg. So sometimes just copy and paste is going to clear all of these up. And now you can see we can actually get that image served directly from this server that we're running off of port 1987 on our local host. And if I hit send on 19, you can see I get 19. If I change that back to 1, you can see there's the Legend of Zelda original. Of course, when I was a kid, this was the popular one. Or sorry, not Majora's Mask, this one. the Ocarina of Time, which is probably the best one of all time, but I know people who are younger than me probably will not agree with that, but that is beside the point. Basically, this is working, but there's still one fairly significant security issue that we have here. And if you want to just be hosting these images publicly for absolutely everyone, then this is not a problem. You can do it just like that. But if we want to only allow our application to be accessing these images, then we need to put some sort of security on this. And the way that we're going to put security on this is basically we are going to go ahead and add to this an API key. So to add an API key check, basically I can just add a function up here to do that. And I'm going to say check API key. And I'm going to have my request, my response, and then next. And then inside of here, we're going to have our const, our API key, which you don't want to typically just put in your code here. Because it's an API key and it's related to security, we want to keep that kind of out of the source code so that if I load this up to GitHub or whatever, nobody's going to see that key, which obviously for our application, which is just a local application that eventually I'm going to run on my local network on a Raspberry Pi, it doesn't really matter because people don't have access to this server anyway. But just for good practice, we are going to put that API key into our environment variable file. And in here, basically, I'm going to say API key. And this is going to be equal to, I'm just going to call it Zelda 1987. And if we save that file and then come back into our server, and now inside of our server.js, we need to finish checking this API key function. So this, this API key is going to be equal to request.query.API key. And basically what this API key right here means is we're querying our request for our API key parameter. So to do that, if I'm making the request, basically what I'm going to need to do is say API key equals, and then whatever I put after here is going to be the API key that I'm passing into this program. So in this case, we said Zelda 1987. That's what we want for our API key here. So we've got our API key, which this is the one incoming from the HTTP request. And then after that, we can say if not API key, meaning the incoming API key, meaning if there isn't one, or if API key does not equal our process dot environment dot API key, then if either of those conditions fail, meaning if there is no API key provided, or if the API key that they provided doesn't match the one in our environment variables file, then we're just going to say return response.status 401. And you all know, well, hopefully you all know a 401 HTTP error means unauthorized. So basically I'm going to pass back a JSON here with an error, and the error is going to say unauthorized. Okay, now with that in place, the final thing that we have to do here is basically run our next command. And what this next is going to do is it's going to tell the calling function to then go to the next middleware function. And what that means is basically when I say middleware, this check API key is going to run whenever somebody comes to our upload URL or our image URL. We want this check API upload key to run. So to check our API key, all we do is we put the function there with a comma, and now you see we've got our URL, and then we have a middleware function, our check API key, and then after that our upload single or our upload file. And then here, if I paste that there again, we've got our image, our check API key, and then finally our express.static. Basically, this is our image location that we're calling, that we're passing back to the user. But if this API key fails, then if the API key check fails, then it's not going to do that. So now if I were to save my file and close down my server and run that again, and now if I open up Insomnia, you can see here I've got my API key and it's blank. If I hit send, you can see I get unauthorized. So if now I were to type in my API key, Zelda 1987, and hit send, now I get that back. So this is working. And just to prove that one more time, we'll change that to 1988, hit send, and we're unauthorized. So our API key is working exactly like we expect it to. That's all good. I should mention here, this is actually a kind of a simple way of doing an API key, and putting it directly in the URL like that isn't always the best idea. Oftentimes you will see that on like APIs online, free APIs and things like that, that it's not a big deal. But if you're going for absolute security, putting your API key in the URL is generally not the best idea for security, because if you have any errors, oftentimes if you just dump out a stack trace, you're going to see this entire URL in that error log. So you're potentially exposing your API key publicly by doing that to the error log on whoever's browser is running your site. So another way that you can do this is, instead of putting the API key directly into the URL, you could put the API key actually within this request JSON, just as a field in that JSON file. But for this project, that's kind of overkill, so we're not going to do that. So we have our server up and running, and we're serving up static images with Multer. Now we need to actually connect our MongoDB database. So to do that, go ahead and bring up MongoDB Compass. And of course, I'm already logged in here. If you're not logged in, it probably looks something like this. Basically, all we're going to do is connect to a MongoDB running on our local machine for this project. So to do that, let's go ahead and keep that local machine with the default port and hit connect. And now we're going to make a new database, and I'm going to call this Zelda MERN. And a collection name is going to be post. So create database, and now in there we've got our Zelda MERN with a post database down here. You can see actually this is my old Zelda from that running site that I demoed in the beginning. Let's not worry about that for now. I'm going to add one more connection here as well, and that's going to be user, that we'll come back to later in the video when we get, or later in the series actually, when we get to our admin panel. But for now, go ahead and click create collection. And now we've got Zelda MERN, we've got post, and then user. So now we need to actually access this Zelda MERN database from our server. So to do that, the first thing that we need to do is, of course, set up our environment variable for that. So I'm going to come into here, and we're going to call this Mongo URI, and I'm going to set that equal to MongoDB : localhost 27017, and then our database name, which was Zelda MERN. And if this looks familiar, that's because in this MongoDB, you'll remember if I hit disconnect, that is exactly that link right there. So connect back to that, and then after that link, all you put is your database name, in this case, Zelda MERN. Okay, with that being set, go ahead and save that file, and we should be able actually at this point to come in here and set up Mongoose. And then with Mongoose set up, we should be able to add, we'll need a model and then some routes for this post collection that we're going to add. So the first thing that we need to do here is, of course, set up Mongoose. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'll just comment this. This is our Mongoose setup. Middleware API key check function. I'm just adding these comments here for the notes on GitHub. And then finally, this is going to be our Multer setup. Okay, So for Mongoose, we need to set up our URI. So I'm going to store it into a variable. I'm going to say our URI is equal to process dot env dot mongo URI. And then after that, we can say mongoose dot connect, and then hand it that URI that we just pulled down from our environment variables. And then after that, I could say const connection equals mongoose dot connection. And now that we have that, I can say connection dot once open, and we're going to hand this an arrow function for when we open it. And basically all I need to do here is write a console log that's going to say MongoDB has been connected. Okay, now that should actually be what we're looking for. Mongoose is in fact set up. If I were to go ahead and save this now, and then start my server again, you'll see MongoDB has been connected. And I should also mention, whenever you edit an environment variable, so if I just make a change in like my JavaScript file, it's not going to matter. That change is going to work into the server as soon as I hit save. If I make a change in my environment variables file, this change will not actually be reflected on the server unless you stop it and then restart it, because the server is going to read in these environment variables at startup. So basically, whenever we change anything here in our .env file, we're going to have to restart our server. Anyway, back in server.js, you can see now the server is running on port 1987 and MongoDB has been connected. Well, that's great that MongoDB has been connected, but we don't have anything in MongoDB yet. So basically, we need to set up our model. And let me just show you really quick. If you look in this server images, if you look in, or rather, sorry, if you look in the folder that I gave you in the project files, you have this Zelda games.json. Go ahead and open that. And if you look in here, you'll see we've got a title and then the Legend of Zelda. And then you've got a release year 1987. And then you've got system and then Nintendo Entertainment System. And then here's the path to our image, which is basically going to be our URL to that image. And then we've got the content, which is the actual content of the article. And then you've got your date and your timestamps down there. And basically this format here is going to be known as, in MongoDB, it's going to be known as a schema. In our JavaScript code or in our Node.js server, we're going to call this basically a model. So to come up back into our backend, to make that model, I'm going to make a new folder here, and we're going to call this models. And then inside of there, I'm going to say new file, and this is going to be post.model.js. And basically, we need to tell our server what schema and what model we're expecting for this post object. So to do that, I need to say const mongoose equals require mongoose. And now we have our mongoose variable. Then we can say const schema equals mongoose dot schema. And then now we need to actually set up that schema. So const post schema is going to be equal to a new schema. And then inside of this new schema, basically, we need to just pass our JSON format. So what we're going to have inside of our JSON for every post, we're going to have a title. And then that title is going to be of type, we're going to say type string, comma, and this is going to be required. So required, I'm going to say true. And then finally, we're going to, well, not finally, there's a couple more actually. Unique, we're going to want all of our titles to be unique, because of course we're going to be using our titles for our after unique. I'm just going to say trim true as well. And trim is basically if there's any blank space or empty space on either side of the string that's submitted for this title, it's going to trim that off. And then after that, I can say min length. And I'm just going to say 1 just to verify that they put any text there at all. It doesn't really matter what you put for that. But anyway, now that we have that title, I need to copy basically everything that we needed there. And if you'll remember in that file, we had our title, our release year, our system, our image path. So for all of those, what I'm going to do is highlight that and then hit Alt, Shift, and the down arrow a few times. And now we've got a bunch of titles, and I'm going to change this one to release year. And basically, these are more or less all going to be the same. The release year does not have to be true, so we're going to change that one. And then trim, we'll leave that, and we're even going to leave that as a string because it doesn't, we could obviously do that as a number, but string is fine. And then after that, I'm going to say our system, which is going to be a string. Again, this one's not going to be unique. And then after our system, we have our image path, which is going to be the URL path to our cover image. It will be unique, but it doesn't have to be unique. So I'm going to change that to false. And finally, for the last one, we're going to say content. Again, it will be unique, but it doesn't necessarily have to. So we'll do that. And then after we have all of that, I'm going to add one more thing down here, which is going to be just timestamps. And I'm going to set timestamps equal to true, which is just going to have MongoDB insert timestamps whenever we add a new item or whenever we modify an item that's already in there. And then after we have that, basically this is our schema for our model. All I need to do now is come down here, say const post is equal to mongoose dot model, and then I'm going to say post, and this is going to be our model name, and then next our schema, and our schema here is going to be our post schema that we just created. And then after the post schema, we're going to say post again, which is going to be our collection name. And the reason I'm doing post again, I can actually leave that blank and it will work like that, but it's going to automatically default me to a lowercase collection, and I named this uppercase, so we're just going to leave it there, and that should be fine. Now, if I go ahead and save that file, our model is all set up and ready to go. Now what I need to do is make a route for that. So to do that, let's make another folder here, and I'm going to say routes is going to be the name of this folder. And then inside of my routes folder, I'm going to make a new file, and we're going to call it post.route.js. And this, obviously, this model and then this route, I could put all of this directly into the server.js, but that's really messy when you do it that way, which is why I'm doing it like this instead. So come back into that post route.js that we just created. And basically in here, we need to set up our router. So I can say const router is equal to require, and this is going to be express.router. And that's what we're going to use for our router. And then we can say let post equal require. And this is basically going to be that post model that we just set up. So I could say slash models slash, and then this post.model right there. And now that we've got those two, basically we could set up a route here for, and a route, by the way, is going to be your URL routes. So if I want to fetch all articles, then I need a route for getting all of them. If I want to fetch a single article, I need a route for fetching a single one. If I want to delete an article, I need a route for that. If I want to add an article, I need a route for that. So here, I'm going to go ahead and add some routes. So this will be get all posts. And I could say router.route. And basically, I'm just going to put a slash here, which means if they go to post, then basically that's going to mean my get all route. So I could say get, and then in here I have my request and my response, and we're going to pass that to this function. Whoops, for an arrow function, make sure you actually type an arrow function. And then basically up here, I could say post.bind, and then we'll do our dot then and catch for our promise. Let's just say then. We could say post is response.json post. And then after that, we could say dot catch, and we could say error is gonna be response.status 400.json, which is, of course, the 400 HTTPs are all error responses. So I can say error. And after this, we'll just say plus error. So whatever that error is, we're going to pass that back. And basically, this should be everything we need for getting all posts. And I can actually even now just show you how that works. So if I come down here and say module.exports is equal to router, and now we're exporting our router. If we save this and then come back into our server.js, and basically if we add a route for that, so here we've got our route for our images. If now below that I say const post router is going to be equal to require, and this is going to be that router file. So if I say routes post.route, and then after that, if I say app.use, and here we could say slash post, and again, this is where I define the URL that we're going to be actually putting in our HTTP request. And if I say post and then check API key, because we want that middleware function to run again, and then post router. So now, if I spell everything right here and then save this, we actually should be able to, from Insomnia, go ahead and access this route here. So I'm going to delete this, and instead of having localhost image, if I say localhost post, you can see cannot get post. Let's go ahead and restart our server one more time. And now let's come in here and send that one more time. And we get post.find is not a function. Okay, what did I do wrong? Okay, so basically what I did wrong is I forgot to actually export this post that we created here. So let's go ahead and do that. If I say module.exports and then equal post, now let's save that file and try that again. Come into Insomnia and let's send that request in, and we get nothing. And of course, that's a good sign. We get 200 OK, which means the request has succeeded, but we get nothing in response. And the reason that we get nothing in response, of course, is if you look in our post database in MongoDB, it is in fact empty. So if we want to add data to that, let's go ahead and do that. Click add data and import JSON or CSV file. And then inside of there, you'll remember we had this, let's see, in C temp, I've got my Zelda MERN project file, and then I've got this project files directory, this Zelda games JSON, which I included in the project files on GitHub. If you grab that and go ahead and select it and then import, well, now we've got 19 different games imported. So now if I come back here to Insomnia and run that same request, I get all of my data. So this endpoint is in fact working. But obviously, we want to do more than just get all of the data. We also want to know how to get a single post, how to delete a single post, and then how to add a post as well. So let's start by, we've got get all posts. Now let's do get single post by ID. So to do that, I could say router.route. And here I'm going to pass it a slash and then colon ID, because we're going to be looking by our ID here. And then I can say .get and then request response. This is going to be an arrow function. And then inside of here, I can say post dot find by ID. And all I need to do is pass in our request params dot ID. And then when we find that, we want to do post is equal to response.json post. Or not equal to, rather, we're sending our post to our response JSON. And then if we can't find it, we are going to do error, and we're going to send that to response.status 400, which is, of course, an HTTP error code, .json error plus our error message. So that should be everything we need there. That should be to get a single post by a single ID. So after that, if we want to delete a post, we can do that as well. So this is to delete a post by ID. And to do that, I could say router.route. And then in here, we will again say ID, or colon ID rather. And then after that, instead of the .get like we had up here for the get single post, I'm going to say .delete. And this is going to be an async function, meaning it's going to run asynchronously. Request response, and again, an arrow function. And we're going to do a try catch block in here. And we're going to catch an error if anything goes wrong. And basically, if something goes wrong, we are going to, let's see, we're going to console.log, or actually, we can even console.error. And we're going to say error deleting post. And then after that, we're just going to print that error. And we are going to set our response status to 500.json, and then in here, error internal server error. You can obviously be a lot more thorough in your logs if you want to, but again, for this project, I don't care to. So now we're going to say inside the try block, we're going to await post dot find by ID and delete. And of course, there's a find by ID and update if you want to do that. So find by ID and delete, and we're going to say request.params.id. So that is, of course, taking that ID from the parameters in the URL. And then after that, we are basically going to response.json. We're going to set our response of this to just a message, because we're obviously not passing back any objects here. So I'm going to say message, at least any database objects. Post deleted successfully. Okay, so that is all that we need for that. We've got our get all posts, get a single post, and delete a post. The only one that we have left right now that we want to add here is going to be our add post function. So to add a post, I can say router.route, and then in here we could say /add .post request response equals, and then down here we can say const, and basically in here this is going to be all of the different variables that we're reading in from our request, which the request, if we're passing in this schema, should match this schema, obviously. So we want a title, a release year, a system, a title, or, oh, whoa, we don't want that. Title, release, system. What exactly is our database? So we've got title, release year, system, image path, content. So image path content. Yeah, this one actually, we don't need this title. So there we go. We have title, release year, system, image path, content. Let's just make sure that matches here in our database. We've got title, release year, system, image path, content. Okay, so let's save that. And now that we have all of those, we need to come into here and add them as variables that we're reading in from the request. So I could say title, release year, system, image, path, content. And then after we get all of those, we've got const equals all of that. And I'm going to set that equal to our request body. And then after that, we can simply come down here and we can say const new post is equal to a new post. And basically, I'm going to pass it all of those same variables that we set into the body. And after that, all we need to do is say new post dot save. And after that, we can do our then and our catch blocks again. So in our then block, we're going to have an arrow function. And basically, that arrow function is just going to say response.json. And here, I'm just going to tell the, I'm just going to log that the post is added successfully. And then in our catch, we can say dot catch. I can say error equal response dot status 400.json. And here I'm just going to say error. And then after that, we'll just hand it the error message. Okay, so that should be everything that we need here. If I save that file, make sure everything's saved, file, save all, so there's nothing saved there. Everything should be running. Okay, so now with all of that running, we should actually be good to go here. So if I come down to Insomnia, and in this body, if I click this drop down and go to JSON, that means I can pass a JSON file here. So let's just take one of these items here. So starting, let's just go all the way to the top. Let's take the top one from this top opening curly bracket down to the closing one here. And we don't need that comma after the fact. If I paste that here, we don't need the timestamps or this extra comma after, and then we don't need this entire content section. So we'll just leave it as in the, and then here, I don't need the ID if I'm going to be adding one. It's going to auto assign the ID. And then here for the Legend of Zelda, let's just say Super Mario. And who knows when that came out? Maybe 1986. I don't know. And with that, instead of post, if I do post/add and hit send, you should see cannot get post, and that's because I left it on get here in Insomnia. But if you'll remember, for our add, we actually need to be using our post function, not blog post. Don't get confused with the name of my model, which is post. Our post HTTP function here. So now if I click send, you can see that we actually get an error here. And that's because we probably need to restart this server. So let's go ahead and do that. And now come into Insomnia and click send and type error, cannot destructure property title of request.body. Okay, so there's one more thing that we actually need to do in our server.js. And basically we need to tell Express that we're using JSON. So of course in here, you can see here for our body, we have it set to JSON and we're passing this JSON in. but we need to tell Express that that's the format that we're using for our HTTP requests. So to do that, all we need to do is say app.use, and then this is going to be express.json. And while we're here, let's have it use cores as well. So I could say app.use cores, and cores is just a library for when you're doing cross-domain HTTP requests. If you don't have cores enabled, you're going to run into security issues, and I actually don't even think it'll work. So cores is used for the security for cross-domain HTTP requests, which of course in our system and running everything on our local machine, this isn't cross-domain, so we don't really need that, but I'm going to put that in there for now anyway, because later if we go to deploy that, you're going to want that there. So let's go ahead and save that, restart the server, and one more time. Whoops, what happened? Reference cores is not defined. Okay, we also need to import cores up here. So we've got express const cores equals require, and basically we can just write cores in there and save that, start the server, and it looks like we're running. Let's try this one more time and see if it works. Hit send on that, and there you can see the post is now added successfully. If we were to delete that and change this to get, so now this JSON body doesn't really matter because we're not doing a post request. If I do get, you can see that we are, of course, unauthorized all of a sudden. Okay, and that is because I deleted my question mark. So send, there's our API key, the Legend of Zelda. If we go all the way down to the bottom, you should see the last one here is Super Mario World. And while we're at it, let's just go ahead and try to delete that route. So again, in our post.route, we have our add, we've got our get single post, and then get all posts. So now let's try to get that post by the ID, just to verify that we can do that. So we'll do post/ID and then the API key, send that, and we get that single post. Now if I change this get to delete, and send that again, you can see our post has been deleted. So if I change it back to get, I should get nothing. And sure enough, we get nothing. So all of our routes that we've added are working. In this video, we've set up our Mongo database on our local machine. We've also set up our server running Express and running Mongoose to interface with the MongoDB, as well as the servers running on Node.js. And we added Multer for serving up static images. Hopefully you guys are learning quite a bit in this process and just building out this backend server. Definitely make sure to stay tuned for the next video, because we're going to actually start building out the front end and start building out kind of what this website is going to look like. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.